Don't be dramatic, Benjamin. It's just one night with my CO. That's what my wife said at dinner. I looked at her and said, okay. She smiled, thinking she'd won. She had no idea I controlled the company on the other side of her merger. Clause 14 was already written. I just had to let her pull the trigger. My name is Benjamin Harrington. I'm 45 years old, and I manage private equity portfolios for a living. It's the kind of work where you learn to read between the lines of financial statements and spot weakness in corporate structures before anyone else does. I build positions quietly, move capital without making waves, and understand that real power doesn't announce itself. Funny how those same skills didn't help me see what was rotting inside my own home. The real fracture in our lives started 7 months ago. My son Lucas, who's 15 now, was in the passenger seat when Cassandra ran a red light on Madison Avenue. She was texting someone. Later, I found out it was Preston, her CEO, confirming dinner plans while our son sat 3 feet away from her. The Escalade that T-boned them on the driver's side sent Lucas through a nightmare of surgeries, steel rods, and rehabilitation centers that still haven't given us good news. He's in a wheelchair now. Might be forever. Cassandra walked away with broken ribs, bruises that faded in weeks, and a concussion that somehow didn't shake loose her ability to lie. She told the police she'd glanced at the navigation. She told me she was distracted by a client call. She told our insurance company she'd been adjusting the radio. Every version of the story was different, but none of them mentioned Preston's name. But Lucas knew. He'd seen the screen light up in her hand. He'd watched his mother smile at whatever message came through seconds before impact, and that image burned itself into his memory, alongside the pain of losing the use of his legs. The doctors say he might regain some function with years of therapy. Might. That word is a lot of heavy lifting in our house these days. He doesn't talk to her much anymore. When she tries to wheel him to physical therapy appointments, he asks me to take him instead. When she leans down to kiss him goodnight, he turns his head toward the window. I've never told him I hate her. He figured that out on his own, the way smart kids do when they realize their parent values a text message more than their safety. Tonight, Cassandra wanted to discuss something important over dinner at Marcello's, the Italian place downtown, where we used to celebrate anniversaries back when we still had things worth celebrating. She wore the black dress I bought her for our 10th anniversary, the one that cost more than my first car. Her perfume arrived at the table before she did, expensive and deliberate. I was already seated when she walked in, heels clicking across marble like a countdown timer. She moved through the restaurant like she owned it, nodding at the maitre d', trailing fingers across the back of an empty chair before settling into hers. Everything about her was calculated. Always had been. She sat down, smiled that boardroom smile, and folded her hands on the white tablecloth like she was about to present quarterly earnings. "We need to talk about the Blackstone deal," she said, skipping past pleasantries. I took a sip of water. Waited. Preston needs this merger to close. You know how important it is. She leaned forward slightly. The firm's been working on this for 8 months. Everything's riding on it. I'm aware, I said. Then you understand why I need to do whatever it takes to make sure it happens. She paused, watching my face for a reaction. Preston asked me to help seal the relationship with the other side. Build trust. Show good faith. I set my glass down. What exactly does that mean, Cassie? She didn't flinch. It means spending one night being charming and available. That's all. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Don't be dramatic, Benjamin, she added, her voice dropping to that reasonable tone she uses when she thinks she's being rational. It's just one night with my CEO. You know how these things work. Sometimes you have to play the game. I looked at her across the candle flame. Really looked, the way you study something you're about to lose. Watched the light catch in her eyes. Watched her lips press together as she waited for me to protest, to make a scene, to give her an excuse to paint me as unreasonable. Okay, I said. She blinked. That wasn't the reaction she prepared for. I could see it in the way her shoulders shifted, the way her hand hesitated before reaching for her wine glass. So we're good? She asked. I nodded slowly. Sure, we're good. But we both knew I was lying. Cassandra left the restaurant thinking she'd won. I could see in the way she walked, shoulders back, chin up, moving through the parking lot like she just closed a major deal. She didn't kiss me goodbye, just touched my shoulder, said she'd be home tomorrow afternoon, and slid into her Mercedes. I watched her taillights disappear into traffic, then sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at nothing. The drive home took 20 minutes. Lucas was still awake when I walked in, his wheelchair positioned by the living room window where he'd been watching the street. He did that sometimes, waiting for me to come home, not because he was worried, but because sitting alone in the silence of this house had become unbearable for him. "Where's Mom?" he asked. I hung my keys on the hook by the door. "Working late." "She's not working," he said flatly. His voice had that edge it gets when he knows he's being lied to. "She's with him, isn't she? That guy from her office." I walked over and sat on the couch across from him. "Yeah." Lucas nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "I knew it. I've known for months." He turned his wheelchair to face me fully. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "The accident," he began, his hands gripping the armrests. "Mom was texting when we got hit. I saw her phone. She was smiling at whatever he sent her. She didn't even see the light turn red." The words hit harder than I'd expected, even though I'd already suspected the truth. Hearing it from Lucas, seeing the anger in his 15-year-old eyes, made it real in a way police reports never could. "I hate her for it," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "She took everything from me. Swimming, basketball, just walking down the hallway at school like a normal person. And she did it because some message from her boss was more important than watching the road. I didn't tell him not to hate her. Didn't offer empty comfort about forgiveness or healing. Sometimes a father's job isn't to fix his son's pain. It's to witness it." "I know," I said quietly. "Are you going to do something about it?" Lucas asked. "Or are you just going to let her keep destroying this family?" I looked at my son, this kid who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd lost his childhood to metal rods and physical therapy, because his mother couldn't put down her phone. "I'm already doing something," I told him. "I've been for weeks." His eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" I stood, walked to my study, and returned with a manila folder. Inside were documents I'd been preparing since the night I first suspected Cassandra's affair. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies, and buried in the middle, a document labeled Blackstone Meridian Merger Agreement, Revision 3, Clause 14. "You remember Preston Griffith?" I asked. "Mom's boss. 12 years ago, Preston worked as a junior analyst at Westbrook Capital. I was consulting there, running risk assessments on their investment portfolio." I opened the folder, showing Lucas a page with Preston's name highlighted. He falsified numbers on a major client report, made positions look safer than they were. When I caught him, I had him fired. Lucas's eyes widened. So this whole thing with Mom was his way of getting back at me. Except he doesn't know that I know who he is. Doesn't know I've been waiting for him to make exactly this kind of mistake. I pulled out another document, pointing to a specific clause. 3 weeks ago, I added language to the Blackstone merger agreement. Any ethical breach by key figures gives the counterparty the right to terminate immediately. "And Mom sleeping with Preston counts as an ethical breach," Lucas said, understanding dawning across his face. "More than that. I'm on the advisory board for Meridian Capital, the company Cassandra's firm is trying to merge with." I closed the folder. She just handed me every piece of ammunition I need to destroy both of them. Lucas was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes since the accident. "Hope." "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "When she wakes up thinking she won." I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because I was at peace, but because I'd finally stopped waiting for permission to act. Lucas stayed up late with me, watching as I drafted the formal compliance notice that would detonate Cassandra's world at exactly 7:58 a.m. The notification went out automatically, triggered by a timer I'd set 3 weeks ago when I first inserted Clause 14 into the merger documents. Cassandra had initialed every page without reading them, too busy scrolling through messages from Preston to notice what she was signing. By 8:15 a.m., my phone started ringing. I ignored it, made breakfast instead, scrambled eggs and toast for Lucas while he scrolled through his tablet, monitoring the financial news feeds where the first whispers of trouble were already surfacing. "Dad," he said, looking up. "Bloomberg just posted something about Blackstone postponing integration talks." "Good," I replied, sliding his plate across the table. At 8:47 a.m., Cassandra called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, then again. On the fourth attempt, I answered. "What the hell did you do?" Her voice was razor wire, tight and cutting. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "Don't play games with me, Benjamin. Preston is losing his mind. The Blackstone acquisition is finished. Who the hell is your husband?" Her words came out in a rush, frantic and sharp. "He keeps screaming that question at me. What does he mean? What did you do?" I took a sip of coffee, let her panic fill the silence for a few seconds. "I didn't do anything, Cassie." "You did. What are you talking about?" "Meridian Capital. The company your firm is trying to merge with." I kept my voice level, factual. "I'm on their advisory board. Have been for 6 years. You'd know that if you'd ever bother to ask what I actually do for a living instead of assuming I was just some boring portfolio manager shuffling papers." The silence on her end was absolute. "Clause 14, I continued. Ethical breach by key figures gives the counterparty unilateral termination rights. You sleeping with Preston while negotiating a deal where I'm advising the other side qualifies as exactly that kind of breach. Congratulations. You just killed an 8-month negotiation. You son of a..." she started, but I cut her off. "And before you start making threats, you should know that everything is documented. Timestamped messages, hotel receipts, even that text you sent me from room 927 at the Waldorf. It's all part of the compliance filing now." I could hear her breathing, harsh and shallow. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes, it is," I said. "Check your health insurance portal when you get a chance. You'll find your coverage has been modified." I hung up before she could respond. Lucas looked at me from across the table, his eyes bright with something that looked like pride. "How long before she realizes what else you did?" "About an hour," I said, "give or take." At 9:30 a.m., my lawyer called to confirm that the separation papers have been filed. At 10:15, Cassandra's assistant tried reaching me on behalf of her boss. At 11 o'clock, Preston Griffith's office left a voicemail threatening legal action. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. By noon, Lucas and I were at his physical therapy appointment, going through the same painful routine we'd done 3 times a week for 7 months. Watching him struggle to regain sensation in his legs, seeing the determination on his face despite the odds, reminded me why I'd done this. Not for revenge, for justice. And we were just getting started. The fallout came faster than I'd anticipated. By the next morning, Cassandra's face was all over the business news, not by name but by implication. Sources close to the failed Blackstone merger site, internal conflicts of interest, read one headline. Meridian Capital pulls out citing ethical concerns, read another. I was in my home office when Lucas wheeled in, holding his tablet. "Dad, you need to see this," he said, turning the screen toward me. It was an internal email from Cassandra's firm, leaked to a legal blog I'd never heard of. The subject line read, "Emergency Ethics Review, Senior Partner Conflict." I scanned the contents. Her firm was launching an investigation. Partners were being interviewed. Clients were being contacted. Someone had moved fast, and it wasn't me. "Who leaked this?" Lucas asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm about to find out." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We should talk. Coffee at Greystone in an hour. DK. Diane Kepler, the new managing partner at Cassandra's firm, the woman who'd taken over operations 6 months ago after the previous leadership retired. I'd met her exactly twice, both times at firm holiday parties where Cassandra had barely introduced us before moving on to more important people. I texted back, "I'll be there." Lucas frowned. "You think it's a trap?" "No," I said. "I think it's an opportunity." An hour later, I sat across from Diane at a corner table in Greystone Cafe, a place too public for anything truly underhanded, but private enough for honest conversation. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed and precise, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Thank you for coming," she said, stirring her espresso. "You have information I want," I replied. "So let's skip the small talk." She smiled slightly. "Direct. I like that." She pulled a folder from her briefcase and slid it across the table. "I've been feeding you information about Cassandra for 4 years." I opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, meeting notes, performance reviews, all documenting Cassandra's increasingly questionable decisions. Things I'd never seen before, details I hadn't known. "Why?" I asked. "Because your sister and I went to law school together," Diane said simply. "Margaret asked me to keep an eye on Cassandra when she joined the firm. Said she had concerns about her ethics." I agreed. "My sister Margaret, who'd passed away 3 years ago from cancer, who'd warned me about Cassandra before we got married, told me she saw red flags I've been too and loved to notice. Margaret asked you to watch my wife. She asked me to watch out for you, Diane corrected. And when I saw what Cassandra was doing, who she was becoming, I made sure you had access to the information you'd need if things went south. She tapped the folder. Every questionable client interaction, every ethical shortcut, every time she threw someone under the bus to advance her career. I looked at the documents again, seeing them in new light. You've been planning this. No, Diane said. You've been planning this. I've just been making sure you had the ammunition. She leaned forward. Cassandra doesn't know it yet, but the firm is going to ask for her resignation by end of week. The ethics investigation is real, and it's going to find things that make the Preston situation look minor. Like what? Like stealing your intellectual property 3 years ago, she said. That risk assessment framework you developed? The one you showed her for feedback? She filed it under the firm's name and built her entire practice around it. I have the documentation proving it was yours first. The room seemed to tilt slightly. She stole my work and made millions from it, Diane confirmed. Which means you have grounds for a lawsuit that could destroy what's left of her reputation and drain whatever assets she thinks she'll walk away with. I sat back, processing. Why tell me now? Because Margaret would have wanted you protected. And because Cassandra hurt that boy. Her voice hardened. I have grandchildren, Mr. Harrington. The idea of someone texting while driving with a child in the car makes me physically ill. What she did to Lucas is unforgivable. She stood, leaving the folder on the table. Use it well, she said. And when this is over, know that you weren't alone. You never were. The foreclosure notice arrived at Cassandra's office on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by certified mail, to ensure she couldn't claim she'd never received it. I know because my attorney called me the moment the delivery confirmation came through. She signed for it 2:47 p.m., he said. You should expect a call shortly. He was right. My phone rang at 3:12 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. On the fifth attempt, I answered. The house. Her voice was shrill, barely controlled. You're taking the house. It's not your house, Cassie, I said calmly. It never was. The property is held in the Harrington Family Trust, established by my grandmother in 1987. You were added as a resident beneficiary when we married, but that status included a morality clause. You violated it. A morality clause? That's insane. We're not living in the 1800s. No, we're living in the present, where legal documents have consequences. I was sitting in my home office, looking out at the garden Lucas and I had planted last spring. You have 30 days to vacate. The trust attorney has already filed the necessary paperwork. I'll fight this. I have rights. You have exactly the rights the trust documents grant you, which as of last week is none. I pulled up the document on my screen. Section 14, subsection C. Beneficiary status may be revoked in cases of moral turpitude, infidelity, or actions detrimental to family interests. Your affair with Preston qualifies on all 3 counts. She was breathing hard, the kind of panic gasps that come right before someone completely loses control. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, I said. But you might want to think about it soon. I heard from a friend at American Express that your credit score dropped to 540 this morning. The silence that followed was absolute. What did you do? She whispered. I reported fraudulent charges. The hotels, the restaurants, the gifts you bought Preston using our joint accounts. Turns out using marital credit cards to fund an extramarital affair is considered fraud in New York. The banks are investigating, and they've frozen your cards pending resolution. You're destroying me, she said, her voice breaking. No, I corrected. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure you can't take Lucas and me down with you. I hung up. Lucas rolled into the office a few minutes later, holding his tablet. Did you see the news? He showed me the screen. A legal blog had posted an article titled, Major M&A Attorney Under Ethics Investigation Following Deal Collapse. Cassandra wasn't named directly, but the details were specific enough that anyone in the industry would know exactly who they were talking about. Who leaked this? I asked. Does it matter? Lucas replied. She's done. Her firm is going to cut her loose before she drags them down with her. He was right, of course. By the end of the week, Cassandra's clients had started requesting new counsel. Her assistant stopped returning her calls. Her parking space at the firm was reassigned to a junior partner who'd been waiting years for that spot. Preston Griffith fared even worse. The board at his investment firm demanded his resignation within 72 hours of the Blackstone deal collapsing. He tried to fight it, threatened lawsuits, claimed he'd been set up. But when the ethics complaint revealed he'd falsified reports at his previous job 12 years ago, the same reports that had gotten him fired back then, his credibility evaporated. I didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, just watched it all unfold with the same clinical detachment I'd used to analyze a failing investment portfolio. On Friday afternoon, Diane Kepler called me. "Cassandra submitted her resignation this morning," she said. "Effective immediately. The ethics investigation found sufficient evidence of misconduct to recommend termination, but the firm gave her the option to resign instead." "What kind of misconduct?" I asked. "Conflict of interest, misappropriation of client resources, and the intellectual property theft I mentioned earlier. That risk assessment framework you developed? We have emails proving she passed it off as her own work and charged clients premium rates for using her methodology." "How much?" "Conservative estimate. For $0.7 million over 3 years." I let out a slow breath. "And you're telling me this because we're preparing a civil suit on your behalf. If you want it, the firm will support your claim in exchange for you agreeing not to name us as co-defendants for enabling her behavior." "What are you offering?" "Full restitution of fees collected using your methodology, plus damages. We estimate you'd walk away with $6.2 million after legal fees." Lucas was watching me from across the room, his eyes bright with interest. "I'll have my attorney contact you Monday," I said. After I hung up, Lucas wheeled closer. $6 million, approximately. What are you going to do with it?" I looked at my son, at the wheelchair that had become his prison because his mother valued a text message more than his safety. "Fund your medical treatments. Every experimental therapy, every specialist, every piece of equipment that might give you a chance at walking again. And whatever's left goes into a trust for your future." Lucas nodded slowly. "She's not going to have anything left, is she?" "No," I said. "She's not." And for the first time since the accident, I saw something like peace settle across my son's face. Cassandra's parents lived in a Tudor-style house in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of place where American flags hang year-round and Sunday dinner is a non-negotiable family event. Her father, Colonel Richard Brennan, retired Marine Corps, 2 tours in Iraq, ran his household with military precision. Her mother, Catherine, taught catechism at St. Mary's Catholic Church and believed that family problems should be handled privately, with prayer and discretion. I'd always liked them, actually. They were decent people who'd raised a daughter whose ambition had slowly poisoned her sense of right and wrong. The package I sent them arrived 3 days before Thanksgiving. Inside, printed emails, hotel receipts, text message transcripts, and a cover letter explaining what their daughter had done and how it had resulted in their grandson being confined to a wheelchair. I didn't send it to be cruel. I sent it because they deserved to know the truth. Colonel Brennan called me on Tuesday evening. "Benjamin," he said, his voice heavy, "I received your package." "Sir," I replied. "Is all of this accurate? The affair, the accident, the text message?" "Yes, sir." Lucas witnessed it. "He can confirm everything if you'd like to speak with him." There was a long silence. "Put him on." I handed the phone to Lucas, who was sitting nearby, doing homework. He took it, his expression serious. "Grandpa," he said. I couldn't hear Colonel Brennan's side of the conversation, but I watched Lucas's face as he answered questions. His voice was steady, factual, delivering the truth with the kind of clarity that comes from having lived through something terrible. "Yes, sir, I saw her texting," he said. "I saw her smile right before we got hit. I know it was a message from her boss, because I saw his name on the screen." More silence as he listened. "No, sir, I don't hate her. I just can't forgive her for choosing a text message over my safety." His voice wavered slightly. "And I can't forgive her for lying about it afterward." When he handed the phone back to me, there were tears in his eyes, but his expression was resolute. "Benjamin," Colonel Brennan said, "Catherine and I are hosting Thanksgiving dinner on Thursday. The whole family will be there. Cassandra doesn't know you've contacted us. I'd like you and Lucas to attend." "Sir, I don't think that's—" "It's not a request," he interrupted. "My daughter needs to face what she's done, and she needs to do it in front of the people who raised her to know better." I looked at Lucas, who nodded. "We'll be there." I said. Thursday afternoon, Lucas and I drove the 7 hours to Dayton. We arrived at the Brennan house just after 4 p.m., the smell of roasting turkey thick in the cold November air. Cars lined the street. Cassandra's brother, her 2 sisters, various cousins, and in-laws. Colonel Brennan met us at the door, shook my hand, then bent down to embrace Lucas. "Good to see you, son," he said quietly. "You've grown." "Hard to tell from down here," Lucas replied, gesturing to his wheelchair. The colonel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Cassandra was in the living room when we entered, holding a glass of wine, laughing at something her sister had said. She froze when she saw us, the wine glass trembling in her hand. "Ben, Lucas, what are you doing here?" "I invited them," Colonel Brennan said, his voice carrying across the room. "Everyone, please take your seats in the dining room. We need to have a family conversation before dinner." The room went silent. Cassandra's face drained of color. "Dad, what's going on?" "Sit down, Cassandra," he said. "Now." The family gathered around the long dining table, 23 people in total, all watching as Colonel Brennan stood at the head and placed my package of evidence in the center of the table. 3 days ago, Benjamin sent me documentation proving that my daughter has been having an affair with her boss. He began, his voice steady but cold. That affair led to her texting while driving, which resulted in an accident that put my grandson in a wheelchair. She then lied about the circumstances to everyone, including the police and her own family. Cassandra started to stand. "Dad, you don't understand. Sit down." The colonel's voice was thunder. She sat. He opened the folder, began reading excerpts. Hotel check-ins, text messages, timeline of the accident, Lucas's witness statement to the police that had been buried in the official report. The room was absolutely silent except for his voice. When he finished, he looked at Cassandra, and I saw something break in his expression. "You are my daughter, and I love you. But what you've done is unforgivable. You put your own child at risk for the sake of an affair. You lied to your family. You destroyed your marriage and your career through your own selfishness." "Daddy, please." Cassandra's voice was breaking. "From this moment forward, you are not welcome in this house until you make this right," he said. "You will apologize to Lucas. You will apologize to Benjamin. And you will spend the rest of your life earning back even a fraction of the respect you've lost." Cassandra's mother was crying quietly, her hands covering her face. Lucas spoke up, his young voice cutting through the tension. "Grandpa, I don't want her completely out of my life. She's still my mom. But I can't live with her anymore. And I can't pretend what she did was okay." Colonel Brennan nodded. "Understood, son." He turned back to Cassandra. "You have 5 minutes to collect your things and leave. Thanksgiving dinner will proceed without you." Cassandra stood, tears streaming down her face, and walked out without another word. The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed felt like the end of something that had needed to end for a very long time. The Wall Street Journal article dropped on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. I was having coffee with Lucas when my phone started buzzing with notifications from colleagues, former clients, and people I hadn't spoken to in years. The headline read, "When Personal Ethics Destroy Corporate Deals, the Blackstone Meridian Collapse." Lucas pulled it up on his tablet and started reading aloud. "A senior mergers and acquisitions attorney at a prominent New York investment firm recently caused the collapse of an 8-month, $2.3 billion merger by engaging in a personal relationship with her CEO while the deal was being negotiated with a company where her husband served as an advisory board member." He looked up at me. "They didn't use her name." "They didn't have to," I replied. "Everyone in the industry knows exactly who they're talking about." The article went into extensive detail about how Clause 14 had been triggered, how the conflict of interest had violated fiduciary duties on multiple levels, and how the collapse had cost both firms millions in preparation costs and lost future opportunities. It mentioned Preston's previous termination for falsifying reports 12 years ago, described the ongoing ethics investigation at the unnamed firm, and referenced pending civil litigation regarding intellectual property theft valued in excess of $4 million. By noon, the article had been shared across LinkedIn 17,000 times. By 3 p.m., it was trending on financial Twitter with the hashtag Clause 14. Business school professors were already emailing their departments, suggesting it as required reading for professional ethics courses. My phone rang. It was an old colleague from Wharton. Ben, is this about Cassandra? He asked directly. Can't comment on ongoing legal matters, I replied. It's her, isn't it? The whole industry's talking about it. Harvard Business School already reached out asking if I'd be willing to participate in a case study discussion. What did you tell them? That I'd think about it. But Ben, this is going to follow her for the rest of her career. She's going to be the example they teach for the next 20 years about what not to do. After I hung up, Lucas wheeled closer. Is that what you wanted? For her to be famous for all the wrong reasons. I wanted the truth to have weight, I said. What people do with that truth is up to them. Cassandra called 20 minutes later. Her voice was hollow, stripped of the confidence that used to armor every word. The journal article, she said. You talked to them. I didn't have to, I replied. They did their own investigation. Found their own sources. Diane Kepler, probably. Maybe some of the legal team at Meridian. Maybe Preston's former colleagues who remembered what he did 12 years ago. Journalists are good at their jobs, Cassie. I'm ruined, she whispered. Columbia called. They want to use me as a case study. Harvard, too. Wharton. Every top business school in the country is going to teach students about my failure. Yes, I said simply. How can you be so calm about this? Because I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourself. I just made sure the documentation was thorough enough that the truth couldn't be buried. I paused. The custody hearing is in 2 weeks. Are you still planning to fight for joint custody? I don't know what I'm planning anymore, she said, her voice breaking. My attorney says I should accept supervised visitation. That if we go to trial, Lucas will testify, and it'll be even worse. Your attorney is right. I'm his mother, Ben. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at Lucas, who was watching me with those eyes that had seen too much, understood too much. Being a mother is about more than biology, Cassie. It's about putting your child's safety first. You didn't do that. You chose a text message over his life, and now you're living with the consequences. She was crying now, the kind of broken sobs that come from finally understanding how far you've fallen. What do I do? You accept the supervised visitation. You show up sober and humble. You spend the next few years proving that you're capable of change. And maybe, if you actually do the work, Lucas might let you back into his life in some meaningful way. And if I fight, then he testifies. The police report comes out. The text message logs become public record. And whatever small chance you have at redemption disappears completely. I kept my voice even factual. Your choice. She hung up without answering. Lucas set down his tablet. Do you think she'll do it? Accept the visitation terms. I think she's finally scared enough to be smart, I said. But we'll see. That evening, I received an email from the law firm representing the 5 clients who'd filed the class action lawsuit against Cassandra. They wanted to depose me as a witness, have me testify about the intellectual property theft and how it had influenced her advice to clients over the past 3 years. I forwarded it to my attorney with a simple note. Happy to cooperate. The net was tightening. The Wall Street Journal had made Cassandra's failure national news. The custody hearing would make it personal, and the class action lawsuit would make it permanent. Lucas and I spent the rest of the evening going through his physical therapy exercises, working on the strength training that Dr. Patel had prescribed. He was making progress, slow but measurable. The experimental treatments were showing promise. Dad, he said during a break, when this is all over, when the hearing is done and Mom's out of our lives mostly, what are we going to do? What do you mean? Are we just going to go back to normal? Pretend none of this happened? I thought about it. No, we're going to build something better than normal. We're going to take what we learned and use it to help people who are going through what we went through. Like what? I don't know yet, I admitted. But we'll figure it out together. He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and went back to his exercises. Outside, the city lights were starting to flicker on, and I stood at the window watching New York settle into evening. Somewhere out there, Cassandra was probably sitting in her lawyer's office, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of her life. But that wasn't my problem anymore. My problem was helping my son walk again, and making sure that the woman who'd put him in that wheelchair never had the power to hurt him again. The depositions for the class action lawsuit began the week after the Wall Street Journal article published. 5 companies, all former clients of Cassandra's, all claiming they'd received compromised legal counsel due to her undisclosed relationship with Preston and her conflict of interest in deals involving Meridian Capital. My deposition was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the offices of Berkman and Associates, the firm representing the plaintiffs. Lucas wanted to come with me, but I convinced him to stay home with his tutor. The lead attorney, Raymond Berkman, was a silver-haired man in his 60s with the kind of sharp eyes that came from 40 years of cross-examining witnesses who thought they were smarter than him. Mr. Harrington, he began after the preliminaries. Can you describe your professional relationship with Meridian Capital? I've served on their advisory board for 6 years, I said. I provide strategic counsel on private equity investments, infrastructure deals, and risk assessment for major acquisitions. And were you aware that your wife was the lead attorney representing Preston Griffith's firm in their attempted merger with Meridian? Not initially. I became aware approximately 4 months before the deal collapsed. What did you do when you discovered this conflict of interest? I reviewed the merger documents and added Clause 14, which specifically addressed ethical breaches by parties involved in the transaction. Berkman leaned forward. You engineered the collapse of the deal. No, I corrected. I created a safety mechanism. My wife engineered the collapse by choosing to sleep with Preston Griffith while negotiating a deal where I had fiduciary responsibilities to the other side. The clause simply gave Meridian legal grounds to terminate when the conflict became untenable. Did you know about the affair before you added the clause? I suspected. I confirmed it about 3 weeks before I modified the documents. And you didn't disclose this to Meridian's board? I disclosed the existence of a potential conflict. I recommended they review all relationships between negotiating parties. They chose to include the ethics clause as a protective measure. Berkman made notes. Let's talk about the intellectual property theft. When did you first develop the risk assessment framework that your wife later claimed as her own work? I pulled out a folder I prepared. 3 years ago. I have timestamp files, email drafts, and notes from initial development. I shared the preliminary framework with Cassandra for feedback. She filed it with her firm 2 weeks later, claiming she developed it independently. How much did she earn using your methodology? According to the financial records her firm provided during discovery, approximately $4.7 million in fees over 3 years, charged to clients specifically for risk assessments using what she called her proprietary framework. And you never received compensation for this? Not a dollar. I didn't even know she was using it until Diane Kepler showed me the internal billing records 6 weeks ago. The deposition continued for 3 hours. They asked about specific deals, specific clients, specific instances where Cassandra's advice might have been influenced by her relationship with Preston or her desire to protect the intellectual property she'd stolen from me. I answered every question with documentation. Emails, timestamps, financial records. The paper trail I've been building for years, not knowing I'd need it, but understanding that in business, you always protect yourself with evidence. When it was over, Berkman walked me to the elevator. Off the record, he said, "This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen in 30 years of practice. Your wife didn't just make mistakes. She created a pattern of ethical violations that her firm either enabled or ignored. What are her chances?" I asked. Of winning? 0. Of settling without destroying what's left of her finances? Maybe 20% if she's smart and her attorney can negotiate quickly. He paused. The firm's insurance company already denied coverage. Morality clause in her professional liability policy. She's going to be paying this out of pocket. How much are the plaintiffs seeking? $3.2 million in damages, plus legal fees. We'll probably settle for $2.8 if she agrees quickly. If she fights, we'll take her to trial and get the full amount plus punitive damages. I nodded. Thank you for your time. Mr. Harrington, he said as the elevator doors opened. I have a son. If someone had hurt in the way your wife hurt Lucas, I'd have done a lot worse than what you did. What you did was methodical, legal, and completely justified. I hope the custody hearing goes your way. The elevator doors closed before I could respond. When I got home, Lucas was in the living room working with his physical therapist, a woman named Dr. Rebecca Simmons who'd been with us since the beginning. How'd it go? He asked, taking a break. Good. The plaintiffs have a strong case. Your mother's going to lose. How much? Probably close to $3 million once it's all settled. Lucas whistled low. She doesn't have that kind of money. No, I agreed. She doesn't. Dr. Simmons finished the session and left us alone. Lucas wheeled over to where I was sitting. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you feel bad? About what's happening to her? I thought about it carefully. I feel bad that it had to come to this. I feel bad that she made choices that hurt you and destroyed our family. But do I feel bad about holding her accountable? No. Actions have consequences. She's learning that now. Good, Lucas said. Because I don't feel bad either. And I was worried that made me a bad person. You're not a bad person, son. You're someone who understands that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting behavior that hurts you. It means choosing not to let that behavior define your future. He nodded, processing that. My phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra's attorney. Client has agreed to accept supervised visitation terms. Will submit consent agreement to court tomorrow. Hearing canceled. I showed Lucas the message. It's over, he asked. The custody part is, I said. Now we just wait for the class action settlement and move on with our lives. Lucas looked relieved. What happens to her now? She figures out how to live with what she's done. And we figure out how to build something better. 8 months after the custody hearing, Lucas took his first steps. Dr. Patel had warned us not to expect miracles. The spinal damage was severe, the prognosis cautious at best. But we'd invested everything into experimental treatments, stem cell therapy, intensive rehabilitation. $300,000 from the intellectual property settlement. Every dollar focused on giving Lucas a chance. I was at the rehabilitation center when it happened, watching through the observation window as Lucas worked with Dr. Simmons on the parallel bars. He'd been practicing standing exercises for weeks, building strength in muscles that had forgotten how to work. Then he moved his right foot forward. Just 6 inches, shuffling and uncertain, but forward. Dr. Simmons gasped. Lucas, did you just? I think so, he said, his voice shaking. Can I try again? He moved his left foot, then his right again. 3 steps total before his legs gave out, and he collapsed back into the wheelchair, breathing hard and grinning like he'd just summited Everest. I walked into the room, my throat tight. You did it, son. I did it, he repeated, wonder in his voice. Dad, I actually did it. The progress was slow after that. 3 steps became 5, then 10. By the end of the month, Lucas could walk 20 feet with assistance. The doctors revised their prognosis from unlikely to regain function to significant recovery possible with continued therapy. Cassandra heard about it through her supervised visitation. Lucas told her himself during one of their awkward Saturday meetings, and according to the court monitor's report, she'd cried for 10 minutes straight. She called me that evening. Ben, the monitor, said Lucas walked. Is that true? It's true. Can I see him do it? Outside of the supervised visits. No, I said. You get 2 hours every other Saturday. That's what the court ordered. That's what you agreed to. Please. He's my son. I just want to see. You gave up the right to those moments when you chose to text instead of drive. I interrupted. If Lucas wants to show you during your scheduled time, that's his choice. But you don't get to ask for more. She was quiet for a long time. You're never going to forgive me, are you? Forgiveness isn't the point, Cassie. Accountability is. You face what you did, you live with the consequences, and maybe eventually Lucas decides whether there's room in his life for you. But that's his decision, not mine. She hung up without saying goodbye. Lucas and I celebrated his progress with dinner at his favorite steakhouse. He walked from the car to the restaurant entrance with my support, 12 feet of shuffling determination that drew stares and smiles from strangers. People are looking, he said. Let them look, I replied. You earned every one of those steps. 2 years later, the Second Chance Foundation opened its doors in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. Not the family house. We'd sold that and bought something smaller, more practical, but a purpose-built facility with state-of-the-art rehabilitation equipment, private therapy rooms, and accessibility features throughout. Lucas, now 17 and walking unassisted most days, stood at the podium during the dedication ceremony, addressing a crowd of donors, medical professionals, and families who'd enrolled their children in our program. 2 years ago, I couldn't walk, he began. My mother's negligence put me in a wheelchair, and I thought my life was over. But my father taught me something important. He taught me that the best response to someone trying to destroy you isn't revenge. It's building something better than what they try to take. He paused, looking out at the audience. The Second Chance Foundation exists because of the settlement money from my mother's intellectual property theft. Money she stole from my father, used to advance her career while lying to everyone around her. We took that money and turned it into hope for families facing what we faced. I watched from the side of the stage as Lucas described the programs, free physical therapy for children with spinal injuries, experimental treatment access, family counseling, educational support. Everything we'd wished existed when we were navigating those dark months after the accident. Cassandra was in the back row. I'd sent her an invitation, not out of forgiveness, but because Lucas had asked me to. She sat alone, watching her son speak about resilience and second chances, tears streaming down her face. After the ceremony, Lucas wheeled over to her. He still used a chair when he was tired, though he could walk short distances now. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said. "You're incredible," she whispered. "What you've built here, what you've become." "What Dad and I built," he corrected. "He's the one who taught me that strength isn't about hitting back. It's about building something that lasts." She nodded, accepting the distinction. Lucas turned to me. "Ready to give the first tour?" "Ready." We left Cassandra sitting there and walked through our facility, showing the first families around their new second chance. The Harrington family had always built things that lasted. This time, we built something that healed.